Welcome back everybody to the Wandering Samurai Study, in which we review and analyze every single act told in Rurouni Kenshin, and today's act is Act 18, the Kenshin Group. All in all, I thought that this was a pretty good chapter. It wraps up one fight, and it wraps up everything else that was set up in the previous act. They had the whole thing with Hyotoko attacking, and we finish off the Hyotoko fight. Hanya and Beshumi had disappeared, and now none of the three men that attacked the dojo are present anymore in this act after this. Unfortunately though, my boy Yahiko is poisoned. So let's go ahead and get into the chapter summary review, and we will go ahead and talk about the highlights. The fight with Hyotoko continues after Kenshin forced Hyotoko to use up all of his gas. As he reloads, Sunosuke insists on finishing the fight by rushing head on into the flames, pulling out his gas bag, and kicking him into a coma. Megumi stands there in awe of the victorious men, and Beshumi spies in anger. From there, Beshumi makes his move at Megumi, and Yahiko jumps in to save the day, declaring that he is also part of the Kenshin group. But before he can look cool, Yahiko is sent into shock as Beshumi's attack was laced with poison. The group freaks out as Kenshin rushes to take out Beshumi, but Beshumi was saved in time by Hanya. The victory celebration is cut as tensions are high with the poisoned Yahiko fighting for his life. So let's go ahead and start off by talking about Hyotoko. One of the things that I actually forgot to mention in the previous act, because it started there and it was just kind of continued in this act, and that's when I remembered, but Hyotoko was actually offended when Sanosuke called him a freak. And I think that is great foreshadowing to the future when we get to see why Aoshi is so protective of this group of shinobi. But we won't necessarily get that until it actually becomes a talking point in the series. I just remembered that, and I thought that it was worth mentioning. Sunosuke insisting on finishing the fight, it almost sounded like Sunosuke had some kind of beef with this guy, like it was almost personal for him, though I couldn't figure out why he insisted on finishing the fight. Maybe it was just because he started it. My guess though is that Sunosuke figured out the gimmick to Hyotoko's fire breath. It was almost as if it kind of offended him that it was such an obvious trick. I mean, that's at least what I like to think. After all, Sunosuke is one to use mano a mano with his enemies. So yeah, like a cheap parlor trick, hiding a gas bag within your body to create the illusion of being able to breathe fire. I guess it would kind of offend somebody who is a fighting merchant. But also, now that I'm thinking about it, the gas bag or the fire breathing man the trick to it just further implements one of these ideas that I mentioned earlier in this video series, is that we are based in reality. And so everything that looks mystical or magical has some type of gimmick to it, or there's a reasoning behind why it is as it is. I mentioned my fellow commenter who discusses his analysis of the chapter with me in the comments. He mentioned the Shino Ippo being a placebo effect. It's not that it necessarily makes the body different. It's not that it necessarily stops the lungs from breathing, but it tricks the user into thinking that it is, or at least the mental mind. And so it has the effect that it is said to be. And then, so we've also see this now with Hyotoko and his fire breathing thing. It's all gas, and he needs to reload and yada yada. But anyways, based in realism, yada yada. And so Sanosuke actually attacks Hyotoko head on, merging through the fire to pull out the fire bag. And Kenshin called it smart. I don't necessarily think that I agree, because Kenshin said that he would get less injuries, attacking the flame head on rather than trying to avoid it. I don't know if he necessarily meant that because of the environment, less injuries for the people around. I don't necessarily agree, because when Sanosuke tries to look cool, he's like easy peasy. Kenshin and Kaoru both point out how burnt he looks, or how burnt he actually got deciding to attack it head first. I don't know, what do you guys think? Let me know, please. With the Sunosuke and Hyotoko fight being over, the group is celebrating and Megumi is standing there in awe. She can't believe that these men are actually strong enough to take on the Oniwaban. How do I say this? Man, she really did get lucky. Stumbling into this group by complete accident. I really like the line with Kaoru saying that I don't know who these men are for you, but for her, they are her friends. And so she should have more faith in these people. These are extraordinary men. And this is where Megumi has a shift of personality. She was using these people to make her escape. We don't see it in this act, but we can see that her awe, her shock in the victory has caused a shift in perspective or thinking with her, and we will see that moving forward, but you can actually spot it here. Yeah. And so it wasn't even necessarily Yahiko jumping in to save her, because she's already been saved before and she was still planning on dipping. It was more so Sanosuke and Kenshin just having complete control of the situation that pretty much changed her perspective. But let's go ahead and talk about Yahiko. Okay, so first things first, I don't necessarily like the name the Kenshin group or the Kenshin-gumi. It sounds like something that a child would make up, and I mean, it very much is. I really like Yahiko, but this is not one of the things that makes me like Yahiko. But one of the things, though, that was pointed out in this version of the manga, and, you know, with the translation being in English and all, Yahiko says, I am also part of the Kenshin group, the Kenshin-gumi. And for the manga or the English translation to include the Gumi part, it also helped me make another connection with the terminology that is used. See, the word kumi means group, but sometimes Japanese words, when put together with another, the consonant sound will take a shift just for the sake of rolling off the tongue easier. So in the instance of Kenshin-gumi, it means Kenshin group. Kumi means group. So I thought that my explanation of why Kumi turns into Gumi when connected to a word, being just transforming for the sake of rolling off the tongue easier, was a pretty decent explanation. But I guess when I was actually looking at the word kumi in the dictionary, it actually has a little section that says it turns into gumi when used as a suffix. My bad. But I just thought I'd clarify that now rather than have somebody else explain it to me later on in the comment section, and I can't adjust the video once it's already on YouTube. And that's pretty much what's happening here. We also see this with the Shinsen-gumi. Anyways, Kenshin-gumi. But back to Yahiko. I think that it was a pretty good move to include Yahiko in this instance, as up until this point, he really hasn't stood out as a character, as apart from all of the side stuff that we see him, the plot is usually moving along without him. He's kind of just in the sidelines making comments or, eating in one particular chapter. He really hasn't had any time to shine except for the chapter before Sunosuke was introduced to the story. So him coming out and saying, hey, I am part of this group as well. It's also kind of a meta way of also, declaring to the audience that's reading, or to the readers, it's saying like, hey, he's part of the cast too, don't forget to include him, he's here too. And Yahiko continues to just be as good as I swear that he is. Because he's perceptive. This is something that's been introduced to his character since the very beginning of his introduction. Yahiko can pick up on cues. He is not really one that's going to jump out of eagerness blindly. And yes, he kind of does that here, but he makes up for it by saying, look, he can't attack. There's no way that he can take down a person like Hyotoko, but he can at least do his part to defend the people around him. He's also part of this group of people, and he's just as capable as anyone else. And though that's not quite true, it just shows that he is wanting to be a part of the action. He wants to prove himself in any way that he can, and even taking on the role from the defensive is admirable enough to give the kid a big ol' pat on the back, or like, yeah. The poison, though, it almost kind of neglects all of that, because it doesn't help that he was poisoned. He jumped in trying to save somebody and look cool, and he's quickly kind of brought down. So I don't know. It's completely up to the reader to interpret that as they want, if it's a good thing or if it's a bad thing. I can see what Yahiko is doing, and I'm a sucker for him in this manga. So I kind of like the move. It makes me feel really bad for him to see him poisoned. But we'll go ahead and talk about that in the next chapter. For now, we have concluded with Act 18 of Rurouni Kenshin and the Wandering Samurai Study. If you like this video and you want to see more, then consider subscribing to the channel, give a thumbs up, and comment down below what you guys think so far. I'm kind of perplexed on the whole Yahiko situation, so if you guys have any input, I'd love to read it. What do you guys think of Megumi so far? And Hanya looked really cool in this act. I don't know, man. I have something about Hanya. He just looks so menacing. If it wasn't for Aoshi already being introduced, I think that he would make a great final villain or something. I don't know, man. I'll talk to you guys in the comments. Bye, cha.